Class number 10. I'm going to talk about both ceremonial and judicial speeches, also known as forensic speeches. Again, after this, the link to this video on Blackboard, I will, if I remember, post a link to two things. One is not optional. I want you to watch the full I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King. It's a just phenomenal example of a ceremonial speech. And there's a lot of, like, even sort of voice inflections and the pacing and the timing, and it's a really masterfully done speech, and not just written but also delivered. So it's a good kind of thing to look at. So that's something I would want you to watch. Then an optional thing, I'm also going to provide links to recordings of old rhetoric classes. If you would like kind of expansion on the material today, feel free to listen to those, but you don't have to. What is a ceremonial speech? What is its goal? When might you write one in your life? I have said a lot of this before. A ceremonial speech is when you want an audience not to make a decision, but to feel a certain way about a person. In particular, you want to praise a person or a group of people or an institution, something like that. So it's not like there's a decision to make. You just want, you're given a speech at somebody's birthday and you want to say nice things about this person and to have your audience feel a certain way towards them. That's it. There's no decision that has to be made afterwards. Can it be put to the service of a deliberative speech? Sometimes, yes, but I want to just sort of focus on what a ceremonial speech is in itself. So what is a ceremonial speech? What I just said. What is its goal? To make people feel a certain way about somebody or something. When might you write one in your life? I've a couple times given examples of this. Best man, maid of honor speech at a wedding, that's a ceremonial speech. Eulogy at a funeral, that is a ceremonial speech. It's kind of sad that those be like the only times, the easiest things to think of when giving a speech like this. I don't know. I mean, kind of a roast is kind of that. You're kind of making your audience feel a certain way about your, in that case, target. But roasts, often end with like some nice words and stuff like that. And a lot of the jokes are meant to be sarcastic or something. So can you use sort of reverse psychology in a ceremonial speech that you say all kinds of mean things, but then you kind of twist it at the end? And, I know what it turns out that whatever. Yeah, feel free to do that, depending on the scenario. When else might you do a ceremonial speech? Somebody's birthday, maybe I'm going to give a toast to this person's birthday. I'd like to give a little speech when I'm leaving my company and retiring. I want to say how great this company's been, and here's why I think you guys are doing great work. Something like that. These are the kinds of scenarios where you would do a ceremonial speech. Maybe like on a kind of one-to-one conversation level, sometimes you have friends that need a ceremonial speech just to kind of get them motivated. It's not like they have a decision to make or not. They're just kind of feeling like down about themselves maybe. And you just want to talk them back up, kind of help their self-esteem. That's a ceremonial speech. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today would apply to that. So these are kind of examples of when you might use one in your life. Go to page 62. The initial questions to ask, it's not a question in the kind of reading questions thing, but it's worth it. So who is my subject? Who exactly are you praising? What aspect of them are you going to focus on? So on and so on. Who is my audience? Who am I trying to inspire? What kind of people are they? And what do they honor? Those are two important things to consider. I would praise, I don't know. I would give a speech of praise about my bishop. I would do it in one way if I was just talking to priests, and I would do it another way if I was doing a speech at a youth conference. Because of what each of those audiences cares about and thinks about, and the way that what they honor and what they are concerned with, I would kind of alter the speech depending on the audience, even if it's the same subject. So that's kind of worth thinking about. What is it that is praiseworthy? What is praiseworthy is virtue. So, and what is virtue? Maybe you don't exactly know what that word is. Virtue is a good habit in somebody's like soul, in their character, some good habit that they have, some good trait that they have. So when you want to praise somebody, which is what a ceremonial speech really is about, what the material you have to praise them is their virtues. However, keep in mind that you are praising not just this person and not just this person's virtues, but you are praising this person and their virtues to this audience. And if you want to connect this person and their virtues to your audience, the virtues that you praise have to be something that your audience cares about. And what do people care about? For the most part, they care about things that benefit them. The vast majority of audiences care about things that are good for them. And so when you are praising somebody and their virtues, the virtues to focus on are the useful ones. They're the virtues that help a community or that help others. Are there virtues that are more self-contained? Yes. So you don't want to give a speech to praise somebody. I mean, you can, but it would be less effective to give a speech to praise somebody and you say, you know, the best thing I can think about this person that I really want to praise is that they were really a really good reader. They really enjoyed reading. I mean, that's cool. That's a nice thing, good for them, but it's not really going to get me very involved and kind of like pumped to hear the speech. That's another, sorry, I'm going to switch back. That's another time when you would want a ceremonial speech. When you're about to go to the gym, you've already made the decision to go to the gym, so it's not a deliberative speech. You're going there, but you've made the decision, but you want to kind of get motivated to have a good workout while you're there. And that's not a matter of choice, that's a matter of feeling. And so a ceremonial speech, remember that the aspect of rhetoric that is most effective in a ceremonial speech is pathos. So how do you want to get yourself to feel? I want to get kind of pumped, and that's where you listen to music, and I don't know. So kind of you get your or like when the football team is about to go out on the field and you're the coach, that's a ceremonial speech. They don't have to choose anything. They're going to play the game, but you want to play them as well. You want them to play it as well as they can. So you want to get them emotionally pumped up. That's a ceremonial speech too. So that's where a lot of this stuff applies to. So what do you want to praise? You want to praise virtue, but you want to praise virtue in particular that is connecting to others, that is useful to others. So what are some virtues? Justice. Having and giving what is due. That's a very kind of primitive definition of justice. Again, this is not Aristotle's book on ethics. This is a book on rhetoric. He gives a different definition of justice in his ethics book. He doesn't care what the actual definition is. This is for the uses of a speech giver. This is all you need to worry about justice being. Having and giving what is due. Each keeps his own things and not those of others. I want to give a speech about my friend Fred. And one day I was with Fred and we went to Walmart and Fred was buying a bunch of frozen chicken nuggets and the cashier was ringing us up, and then Fred paid and we were walking almost all the way to the car, and the car he parked really far away, by the way. And we're almost at his car, and he just happens to look at the receipt, and she had rang him up for 17 boxes of chicken nuggets when in fact he had bought 18 of them. And he realized, oh my gosh, they didn't charge me. And he checked in the bag, and there was actually 18 in the bag, but she only charged him for 17. A lot of people would just keep going, especially on a hot day like that, and we were almost to the car, and the nuggets are melting. But nope, not Fred. Fred went all the way back to that cashier, and he found her, and he said, nope, you didn't charge me for one, please. Here's the money for that 18th box of Dino chicken nuggets. Now, what does that tell you? First of all, stories can be very useful in ceremonial speeches, especially if they're short and sweet. What does that tell you about Fred? It doesn't work to say Fred was a just man and acted fairly. Okay, just don't say anything at that point. That means nothing to anybody. But to give an illustration of just how just he is. Just how, wow, he would not even take that $3 box of chicken nuggets for free from Walmart, one of the richest institutions in the world. Even then, nope, I'm not going to take something that doesn't belong to me. And that's the kind of guy Fred was. You see what I mean? And you're like, man, Fred really was an exceptional guy. I want to be. And then the little kid's like, I want to be like Fred. Or whatever. Okay. So that's an example of how you would use justice in a kind of ceremonial way. Courage. Courage, performing fine actions in danger. Why is it useful to others? Soldiers need it to protect the city. Again, so why is justice useful? Well, man, if everybody was like Fred, we wouldn't even have to worry about thieves or anything like that. Courage, how's courage useful? Well, we need courageous people to defend us in war and things like that. So again, how do you use courage in a ceremonial speech? So let me back up half a step. How are these going to be useful in a ceremonial speech? Well, who's the person you're praising? Which of these virtues do they have? Are they just? I don't know. Fred was just, but Frank was kind of a scoundrel. However, one thing I'm going to give to Frank, he was courageous. You know? And especially if Frank was a cop, that's the kind of thing, you know, hopefully you're not talking at his funeral, but let's say you're giving a toast at his birthday, and Frank was a cop and you want to praise his courage. You know what? Cops are in the line of fire all the time. And I got to tell you, Frank, he has his vices, but cowardice is not one of them. He is a courageous man. I'm going to give you an example. Then you tell some story about how Frank was courageous. And again, you're showing the people this is what and if you want to even kind of bring it home and you say, and you know why Frank does that? He does that because he loves his community, and that's you guys. He does this out of love because he cares about you. He's willing to face these dangers. Oh my gosh, that's like just goes straight to the heart. And just, oh my gosh, this is, and they really like their heart kind of opens up to in feeling good things about Frank. Okay, I got to keep track of these names. Okay, why is temperance? Sorry, what is temperance? Not giving into pleasure. Why is that useful? You might not think of it immediately, but each desires in accord with the law and not otherwise. Why is temperance a useful thing for a community? Because intemperate people eventually start hurting others. When you eat you're hungry and you're intemperate, and you eat somebody else's food, and now somebody else is going to be hungry. When you are feeling other bodily desires and you attempt to fulfill them with other people's spouses, intemperance can be a very harmful thing to a community. So how do you want to praise temperance? Again, now, here's another point. In fact, I'm getting into a later section about magnification, but let me just answer that question right now. Number 4, how can someone magnify a good thing to try and make it look even better? Bottom of 64. I'm going to do this because I'm already doing it in my little impromptu speeches about Frank and Fred. How do you want to magnify things? It's definitely not that effective to just say Fred was just and Frank was courageous. You want to tell a story, but you want to tell a story that's magnifying. If he was the first or only one who's done this, or if it was the first time this happened, I want you guys to know that Steve is the first person ever to eat 17 boxes of dino nuggets. I don't know which virtue that would be. I don't think that's really a virtue. Anyway, whatever. But if he was the first ever to do it, all right, that's something. If it was done in a difficult or unlikely way. So the story I told about Fred, I think Fred was the one guy that went back to Walmart. The story that I told about Fred going all the way back to Walmart, you sort of, it was a hot day and who wants to walk? And then the dino nuggets are melting. So the difficulty against all odds, the weird time and place. And man, it wasn't like today. Back in those days, the dino nuggets didn't stay frozen like they do now, whatever, So you want to say these things to show how exceptional this act is or this virtue is in this person. If it was done successfully many times over, this guy, man, he just never failed in doing whatever it was that you were praising. If you began an institution of any kind, that's important. Man, the founder, we are all here today because of Jimmy Bob. Without Jimmy Bob starting the Jimmy Bob Dino Nugget Emporium, none of us who work here would be here. And he founded this great institution that we are all honored to call not just our place of work, but our family here at Jimmy Bob's Dinosaur Nugget Emporium. Okay? So these are magnifications of this. So that's temperance. So temperance, gosh, what's somebody who's extremely temperate? Yeah, I guess you could do something. There's a story of... another place for ceremonial rhetoric is the stories of the saints or of these great people, noble people that, the great heroes of old that you want to inspire. So inspiration is kind of the shortcut to understand what a ceremonial speech is. If you just want to inspire people, that's what a ceremonial speech is. When you're reading the lives of the saints, There's an old story. I actually don't even know the names of the saints that this story is about, but there's two bishops walking around sometime in the old days. I don't know when, but I just remember hearing the story. And these two bishops are walking around and they're talking or whatever, and they see a woman of ill repute, you know, a prostitute or something, and she's standing on somewhere on the street, and one of the bishops, you know, and she was dressed for work, and so one of the bishops temperately turned his eyes away and, you know, kept his modesty, you know, the modesty of his sight, custody of his eyes, and he looked away, and the other bishop looked straight at her. And so you would think that it was the first bishop that was being temperate and the second one that wasn't. However, but that second bishop, what did he do? He looked her right in the eyes and he started having a conversation with her about how she is created in the image of God, and she is you know, she has dignity, and how, you know, he's not going to look down on her or judge her, but, you know, maybe there's a better way to live that wouldn't put her, you know, kind of where she would victimize herself by putting her, you know, in a situation like she's putting herself in. And he started to have this conversation, and it turns out that was the first time anybody had spoken to her in love. Everyone else was either using her or was judging her. But the first time anybody had ever spoken to her as if she was a human being was this bishop who looked right at her. Wow, that's beautiful. And now, so it's not just temperance as in he doesn't want to look because if he looks, he'll have some bad thoughts. No, he's able to look, and he can look and still see God's image in her. That's a really intense, magnified kind of form of temperance. That's an example of that. Okay. Magnificence. So there's magnificence and liberality are kind of partner virtues. Magnificence is when the wealthy produce beautiful things for the public. So to be magnificent is not the same as to be generous or liberal. Being liberal and generous are synonyms in this context. So being magnificent is not the same as being generous. You're generous when you buy, you know, a drink for your friend. That's generosity. You're magnificent when you build a hospital. Is it the same basic idea? Yeah. Is it different though? Yeah. What's the difference? Well, you got to be really rich to be magnificent. Well, that doesn't seem fair. Well, it doesn't matter if it's fair or not. But why is the difference just a matter of how much money you spend? No. Magnificence is you do something for an entire community. When you build a hospital, that's not just for your buddy Steve. I'm running out of names here. For your buddy Andrew. Okay. When you're generous, you buy your buddy Andrew a beer. When you're magnificent, you buy the city of Houston a new hospital and you donate that to the entire community. That's magnificence. What's the difference? Well, it's not just the difference between more and less. It's the difference between an individual and a community. There's a difference of kind there. So again, when you give, man, I want you guys to know, and this is actually a true story. In California, there's a system of hospitals called Rady's Hospital. And there's a children's hospital or whatever. And so one day I was at a college and I was attending a talk at this college with a friend of mine. And so we're sitting, it was kind of this like exclusive thing with the president of the school that I teach at he got us take, okay, go. And we're sitting, and it was just like, wow, there's only about 50 people here. It was this talk on artificial intelligence. Like, oh, interesting. All right. And we're sitting, and then the guy next to us, this kind of older guy, he's like, starting just kind of joking around. He's kind of funny old guy. And he's like, oh, you want to, and I'm getting up to get a beer. And I'm like, you want a beer, dude? He's like, yeah, sure, I'll get a beer. I'm like, what kind of beer? He told me, I brought him a beer, and we're talking. He's talking about golf, and he's talking about this and whatever. And then like in the middle of the talk, the guy just like kind of gets up and leaves. He's kind of bored, he leaves. And then my friend who I was with looked up the name on his name tag, which I didn't even pay attention to. And he's like, you know who that was? And I said, who? He's like, that was Rady. As in the guy that bought all these hospitals and it was one of the richest people in California at the time. And we were just sitting next to him, just like a normal dude. But if I'm giving that guy a speech, I'm going to give the speech and I'm going to say, you know, I didn't keep in touch with him, unfortunately, but I'm going to give a speech about this guy and I'm going to say, not only did he donate and fund all these hospitals that have his name on them, there's something called the Rady Shell, which is a concert venue, outdoor concert venue right on the water in San Diego, where you can go and hear symphony and all this cool stuff that has his name on it, right? Not only did he do all that, But if you were to talk to him, he wouldn't even like brag about it. He was just a normal dude. And when I first met him, I thought he was just a normal, funny old guy that was asking me for a beer. And not only is he like magnificent to do all these great deeds, he doesn't brag about it. So that's a way to magnify it. You do these great things and you don't flaunt it. So you see that? That's magnificence. Magnanimity is the virtue of a very accurate and high, both accurate and high self-respect. It's somebody who deserves respect and knows they deserve respect, and they carry themselves in that way. I don't see how that's very useful to others. The great do or produce great things for others. Okay. When I think of magnanimity, I think of like army generals, kind of the way they carry themselves. They know they've served their people, their community really well, and they respect themselves when they're kind of around. And there's something kind of, another example of magnanimity is like people who are not in a hurry. Like, I'll get there when I get there. I'm not in a rush. I'm not going to rush you either. They respect themselves and they respect others. An extreme version of this is the like action hero trope of like there's a building exploding behind them, but they're not even running. They're just kind of walking away casually, and they don't even turn around to see it. That's kind of a funny example of magnanimity. Gentleness, so when you're kind of peaceful with others, and like, oh man, let me see another name. Rick, my buddy Rick. Gosh, that guy, some people have tempers, but Rick, I have seen people, we would be out drinking sometimes and people would just be drunk and belligerent and they would just get in Rick's face and cuss him out, and he would just be so gentle and kind to them. And one time this guy literally punched him and Rick just literally turned the other cheek, and I've never seen somebody do that. And so that's an example of gentleness. Prudence, planning well for happiness. Each is best able to guide his life and rules of the city. That's a good one for a leader. Gosh, this guy, he was the leader of our business. He was the owner of this thing or whatever. And boy, it was a weird time. And we weren't sure whether we were going to move to this city or stay in this city or apply for this or do that or whatever. And I got to tell you, he didn't just make a gut decision. He sat there. He talked to every one of us. He got all of our opinions. He weighed and balanced things. He looked at all the big picture, and I think he nailed that decision. Nobody would have made a decision like that, but he really put a lot of thought into it. I think prudence could be a very praiseworthy thing. Wisdom, similar to prudence. The wise man is best able to teach others the truth. Being a good teacher, I think, is a good praiseworthy thing. You hear that sometimes a lot when people get awards or something for teaching. All right. So these are what kind of virtues are important to consider when writing a ceremonial speech. The answer is the virtues that are useful to other people or to the community. And you show how they helped others and how specifically they helped the audience that you're speaking to. All right. Let's say you're in a bad situation, number 3. What could someone do who has to write a ceremonial speech about someone lacking in virtue? You got to give a eulogy for your uncle Braden. And your Uncle Braden was kind of a jerk, and nobody really liked Uncle Braden. What can you do? Page 64. Well, he didn't really have any virtues to speak of, but you can get close enough. Taking things in the best possible way when praising someone. For example, let's say Uncle Braden was just the coldest, most unemotional person you've ever met. You don't have to call him cold and unemotional. You can say, you know what? He was a very cautious individual. He was careful about who he opened up to. All right, you're kind of taking a vice and making it into a virtue. What does this actually mean, by the way? Remember, a rhetoric is not about lying. What does this actually mean? It means maybe deep down Uncle Braden wasn't so bad, and maybe we saw him as cold, but he really was just a cautious person. Maybe he'd been traumatized, and that's why he didn't open up so much. So it's not about saying that in a deceitful way. It's about really believing that in your own heart. There's more to people than you know. And don't give them the benefit of the doubt. It's never going to hurt to do that. Calling a simpleton amiable. So this guy, Uncle Braden, not only was he was also just kind of just an idiot. He was just a really stupid, dumb person. But, he was, but he was simple. He was straight. He didn't overcomplicate things. Whatever, something like that, Calling an angry person straightforward. Braden, He is just an absolute jerk. Well, you don't have to call him a jerk as usual. You call him. One thing I really respect about Uncle Braden, he told you how it was. He was straightforward. He was honest. All right, that works. Calling an arrogant person imposing. Gosh, this guy Braden's really turning out bad. Uncle Braden was just really full of himself. You can say, gosh, the guy had a lot of self-respect. And you really, when you walked into a room, you really knew somebody walked into a room. Calling a spendthrift generous. So Braden, Uncle Braden is just cheap as anything. I'm doing the opposite. You would call a cheap person, he was wise with his money. And you would call somebody who just wasted all their money, oh, he was so generous. Okay. This comes not from, I talked about this, not from simple deception, but from the fact that virtues are wide, realities are open to interpretation. It's more to show how the person or action being praised was deliberate, not accidental. This is because actions are chosen are more truly praiseworthy. I do want to say this. Page 63 that I skipped, these are the vices. These are the things that are necessarily dishonorable. When would you want to use these in a speech? When you're talking about your opponent in a political race, when you are talking about the other team, when you're a football coach, you would use these. I'm not going to go through them, but you would use these vices to describe them. Okay, talked about magnification already, so I did number 4. Let's take a look at the Gettysburg Address, page 66. Let's see how, there's no decision here. He's just honoring, so he's giving a ceremonial speech. Abraham Lincoln is giving a ceremonial speech, November 19th, 1863, to honor the men that died on that battlefield. Famous, 7 years ago. Our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. All right, nice way to start. Now we are engaged in a great civil war. So he's amplifying. This is a great civil war. It's big, not great as in good, but it's huge. Testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield, that of a war. So it's not just the war, but the battlefield is great. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. So it's right. It's a good idea. We're going to dedicate a part of this battlefield to be a cemetery for the people that died on this battlefield. Beautiful. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. This is really beautifully said. So this is a great magnification. So he's saying, I, the President of the United States, it doesn't really mean much for me to dedicate this land in honor, as a cemetery to honor the men that died here, because the men that died here already made this land holy. Wow, that's beautiful. You see, so a part of ceremonial speeches, if you want to inspire people, you have to kind of surprise them. You can't say exactly what they expect. And so the way the Lincoln is doing this here is saying, oh, we're going to hallow this ground, or we're going to hallow this ground. You know what? No, we're not. We can't, because they already did it. And that's not something the audience would expect. And because it's a surprise, it's going to kind of hit the heart in a special way. That's what makes the speech kind of so beautiful. There's a funny line. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, which is ironic because everybody remembers this speech. But it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work. Oh, another nice twist, right? It's not that we're going to dedicate this land. The land is going to dedicate us. Or the people that died here are to dedicate us to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. Wow, great. So again, what's he doing there? There's great noble words, fourscore and all that stuff, but he has an idea. He has kind of a thesis statement he's pushing all the way through. You don't really even find it till the end. It's kind of a surprise at the end, which you can do if you're a good speechwriter. All right, that is ceremonial speeches. Please do watch the Martin Luther King speech after this. You'll see another great example of that. Real quick on judicial speeches, I don't find these as practical or important unless you're going into law, in which case they're the most important thing. And I presume you're going to be studying them on your own. So, go to page 93. What is a judicial speech? It is where you are proving somebody innocent or guilty. Is the implication that it's also part of a deliberative speech a lot of times? Yes, because, well, he's innocent, and therefore you should vote for him to be innocent, or whatever. I don't know what they call jurors, what jurors do. Whatever that is. Okay. What is a judicial speech? What is its goal? To prove somebody guilty or innocent. When might you write one? I don't know. Maybe you live in a dorm and then somebody's being accused of not washing the dishes and you want to say, no, that guy definitely washed his dishes. So I don't know. I can't think of many scenarios where this is used in a day-to-day life. That's why I'm going to kind of work through it fast. What are some reasons why someone would break the law? So the important thing in a judicial speech. Well, let's look at these initial questions to ask. On sit, whether it is. Did this actually happen? So if you want to prove your buddy innocent, you can say, like, dude, look at the sink. It's empty. What are you talking about? He didn't wash the dishes. They're washed. So if it didn't happen, problem solved. What is it? What exactly happened? Wait a minute. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at the dishes. You know, whatever. What exactly were they left? Are they from last night or from dinner? Whatever. Look at the details. What kind is it? Was it just or unjust? Okay. So if it happened, it was a bad thing that happened, but was it done justly or unjustly? Was it an accident? Whatever, something like that. Don't care about the kinds of law. Motives. Let's look at motives. If there's no motive, it's going to be hard to prove that, let me think of another name, that Samantha didn't wash the dishes. She doesn't have a motive. Why would somebody do something unjust? Because they're cheap. And if they're cheap, they would steal, gamble, do other things with money. So if you want to prove that somebody didn't steal something, you would say, look, what are you talking about? Why would he steal this? The guy just bought all of us around at the bar last night. Well, maybe not last night because now he needs the money. But the guy buys us around all the time. He's a very generous person. It's cheap people that steal. Maybe you can make a case like that. Intemperance. So again, like if somebody is committing adultery, no, dude, this person, they don't even they don't even look at scantily clad people on Instagram, much less do something like that with somebody else's spouse or whatever. Softness. So here's now we'll get to the dishes. Why would somebody not wash the dishes? Because they're lazy. But Stephanie, I think that's the name, Stephanie's one of the hardest working people here. She's the one she cleans everything. What do you mean Stephanie didn't wash the dishes? So again, the motive isn't there. This inner disposition to do this injustice wouldn't be there. Cowardice. I don't know about Stephanie, but I'll tell you this. Samantha, you know how she's really grossed out by touching wet food? I think you might have a problem with Samantha, maybe not Stephanie. She's got that cowardice about touching wet food. Matters of honor. Yeah, I guess if somebody does something like sleazy and they're just like a very person that really cares about respect and stuff like that, it would be more surprising to believe that they did it. Anger. So, this person punched that one. No, there's no way. He's so calm. Maybe, again, you can make a case for that. Maybe then again, he's calm because he's been holding it in and he finally let it out. I don't know. Love of victory. I don't know. Bitterness. Yeah, if you can show somebody is bitter, it might be more likely that they would hurt the person they're bitter towards. Stupidity. Sometimes people just don't get it. Yeah. And if they're habitual. So, shameless and so on. So, use these as you think might be fit to prove a motive. So they're going to do it because they have a motive. That's one part. Second, they're going to do it because they think they can get away with it. Page 94 at the bottom. People think they can get away with it because they think they can do it, so they're able to. because they think they won't get caught, because they think they won't be punished or punished very severely. So if you want to show somebody's guilty, let's say you want to show Samantha's guilty. Not only is Samantha afraid of touching dirty food, wet food, she's also lazy, and we all know how lazy she is. Not only is that true, she knows very well she can skip washing the dishes because Stephanie's always washing her dishes, in fact. Second, she thinks she won't get caught because she used Stephanie's coffee mug this morning, and I saw her using Stephanie's coffee mug, and so she wanted to frame Stephanie. And third, because they think they won't be punished, and I gotta tell you, Samantha's always doing this because every time she does, we give her a pass, and she knows she can get away with it. You see that? You're kind of building a case for their guilt. Last class, I think I talked about Socrates defending himself in the Apology of Plato. That's there in the PDF that you have, page 95 to 99. I encourage you to read it. I don't know if I'm right or wrong. Maybe Socrates did a great job defending himself, and Athens was just unjust in condemning him. Maybe he did it interesting, like he just did it in a weird way, or maybe he didn't do a very good job defending himself and claiming his innocence. It's not that clear. It's an interesting way to start reading the Apology. I'm not going to go into that because that's a whole bag of worms. But if you would like to read it, feel free to. So we went over the Lincoln speech. I'm going to leave the MLK speech underneath this one, a link to that, and then link to the previous classes. I'll probably just leave the link to the ceremonial speech class because the forensic one is, I think, way less useful. I will say this, though. As you are reading for next class on the emotions, it is a long PDF. This is the time where I would suggest you just skim the Aristotle text and read my class notes, and I have a little bit of Hamlet, and I have a little bit of the book of Job to kind of illustrate certain things. Focus more on my class notes that are there in the PDF and on the examples that are there. And then we'll talk about it in the next lecture. Just emotions. Oh, and character. Oh, so there's a lot to do next class. That's going to be annoying. All right. I'll see you then.